Wisdom, wisdom, that's a test. Which rival wisdom team is best? 52 teams of 8 antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries.
Team 28, begin deliberately. Quote definitions, biographical context and synergy analysis. ReplaceHate.org, motivationaleducation.com, guidelife.com. Quote 28.1. To begin. William Wordsworth, 1770 to 1850. Quote definition. The most direct and most complete prescription for overcoming the paralysis of preparation, planning, and procrastination is contained in 2 words. Begin. Not prepare to begin. Not plan your beginning. Not begin when conditions are right. Just begin. The act of beginning is both the necessary first step and, in many cases, the sufficient condition for everything that follows. Quote application. Every person considering whether to engage with wisdom education, to extend genuine kindness to someone difficult, to stand against hatred in their community faces this exact choice. The conditions will never be perfectly favorable. The preparation will never feel complete. Wordsworth's 2-word prescription is the standing answer. To begin. William Wordsworth was born in 1770 in Cockermouth, Cumberland, educated at Hawkshead Grammar School and St. John's College, Cambridge, and became, with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the founding figure of English Romantic poetry. Their jointly published Lyrical Ballads of 1798, with its famous preface arguing for poetry written in the language of ordinary people about ordinary experience, launched one of the most significant literary movements in the English language. Wordsworth spent most of his adult life in the Lake District, walking the fells obsessively. His sister Dorothy estimated he had walked some 180,000 miles in his lifetime, composing poetry aloud on his walks, and producing a body of work, the Prelude, Tintern Abbey, the Immortality Ode, that documented with extraordinary precision the relationship between human experience, memory, and the growth of consciousness. His 2-word prescription for beginning reflects a poet who knew from long creative experience that the waiting for the perfect opening was the enemy of the work, and that the work itself, once genuinely begun, generated the conditions that waiting could never produce. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Treat the act of beginning as its own sufficient instruction. Not the preparation for beginning, not the planning of beginning, but the actual initiation of the first step. 2. Recognize that the conditions requiring beginning are almost always present right now. The lack that feels like an obstacle to beginning is usually resolved by beginning rather than by addressing it first. 3. Apply Wordsworth's prescription to every domain where preparation has substituted for action. To begin the wisdom education, to begin the honest conversation, to begin the community engagement, to begin.
Quote 28.2. Routine is not organization, any more than paralysis is order. Arthur Helps, 1813 to 1875. Quote definition. The appearance of organization, regular routines, fixed schedules, habitual procedures, is not the substance of genuine organization any more than frozen stillness is genuine orderliness. True organization is active, purposeful, responsive to what is actually needed, not the repetition of familiar patterns that feels systematic while achieving nothing new. Quote application. For any mission or individual engaged in genuine change, this principle is the standing challenge to examine whether what feels like organized deliberate action is actually purposeful engagement or comfortable habit wearing organization's clothing. The routine of doing the same thing the same way, without genuine assessment of whether it is actually producing results, is paralysis dressed up as productivity. Arthur Helps appears in Team 27 as well, where his observation about asking for advice activating admiration anchored that team's relationship layer. Born in 1813 in Streatham, Surrey, and eventually clerk of the Privy Council under Queen Victoria, Helps occupied a position at the center of British governmental organization for decades, which gave him extensive direct experience of the difference between genuine organizational effectiveness and the comfortable performance of organizational routine. His observation that routine is not organization and paralysis is not order reflects the hard-won insight of someone who had watched bureaucratic habits persist long after they had ceased to produce results, maintained by the comfort of familiar procedure rather than by any genuine connection to the purposes they were meant to serve. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Distinguish regularly between routine, the habitual repetition of familiar actions, and genuine organization, the purposeful structure that actually serves the goal it is meant to achieve. 2. Subject existing routines to honest evaluation. Is this producing what it is meant to produce, or is it comfortable habit that has outlasted its purpose? 3. Apply this to the mission. The routines of content production, community engagement, and organizational process deserve regular honest assessment against actual results rather than comfortable continuation because they feel productive.
Quote 28.3. Today a reader, tomorrow a leader. Margaret Fuller, 1810 to 1850. Quote definition. The reading and learning of today, the deliberate absorption of ideas, perspectives, and wisdom, is the investment that produces the capacity for genuine leadership tomorrow. Leadership is not an innate quality but a developed one, and its development runs through the sustained, serious engagement with what others have thought and experienced that reading provides. Quote application. This principle is the most direct possible statement of the connection between the wisdom education that these 52 teams provide and the leadership in making America wiser and kinder that the mission seeks to develop. Every person who reads these principles seriously is investing in the capacity for the leadership that a wiser and kinder community requires. Today's reader is tomorrow's leader, in their family, their community, their workplace, and their world. Sarah Margaret Fuller was born in 1810 in Cambridgeport, Massachusetts, educated with unusual rigor by her father, who treated her intellectual development with the seriousness typically reserved for sons, and became the most formidable intellectual woman of the American Transcendentalist movement. Editor of The Dial, literary critic for Horace Greeley's New York Tribune, author of Woman in the 19th Century, the first major American feminist text, and foreign correspondent in Rome. During the Italian Revolution of 1848, she drowned in a shipwreck off Fire Island in 1850 at 40, returning to America with her Italian husband and infant son, none of whom survived. Her observation about reading and leadership reflects both her personal experience. Her serious reading had made her the equal of any man in the Transcendentalist circle, and her conviction that the systematic exclusion of women from serious education was a systematic exclusion from leadership that had no justification beyond habit and prejudice. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Treat today's reading and learning as a direct investment in tomorrow's capacity for leadership, not as an end in itself, but as the development of the capability that leadership requires. 2. Apply this principle to everyone around you. The person who reads seriously today is developing the leadership capacity that their community will benefit from tomorrow, regardless of whether they currently hold any leadership position. 3. Recognize that wisdom education, including these 52 teams, is leadership development in the most fundamental sense, building the capacity for wiser, kinder, more genuinely effective engagement with the communities that need it.
Quote 28.4. Love the giver more than the gift. Brigham Young, 1801 to 1877. Quote definition. Genuine gratitude and genuine love are directed toward persons rather than their benefits. The person who values a gift more than the person who gave it has inverted the hierarchy of what matters, treating the instrument as more important than the human being it expressed. Relationships are always more important than what they provide. Love directed toward the giver is more genuine and more durable than appreciation directed toward what the giver gave. Quote application. This principle applies at every level of the mission. The wisdom in these 52 teams is the gift. The extraordinary human beings across 2,500 years who thought these thoughts and lived these lives are the givers. The communities the mission serves are the gifts. The human beings within them are the givers of their trust and engagement. Always love the giver more. The person is always the point. Brigham Young appears in teams 20, 21, and 24 as well, where his principles about freedom through right action, duty over discretion, and the Chip N. Wood psychology anchored those frameworks. Here his most tender observation takes the stage. Born in 1801 in Whitingham, Vermont, Young led the largest mass migration in American history, governed Utah Territory, and built one of the most remarkable communal organizations of the 19th century. His personal life included an enormous polygamous family. He had dozens of wives and children, which makes his observation about loving the giver more than the gift somewhat poignant in its personal context. He had more experience than most of the complexity of what love directed toward persons rather than their benefits actually required. The principle he articulated was both a genuine moral insight and, for him, a daily personal challenge. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Consciously redirect gratitude and appreciation toward the persons who give rather than the benefits they provide. Love the teacher more than the lesson, the friend more than their help, the community more than its resources. 2. Recognize that relationships oriented around what they provide are more fragile than relationships oriented around the persons within them. When the provision changes, only person-directed love survives. 3. Apply this to wisdom education. Value the extraordinary human beings behind these quotes, their lives, their struggles, their genuine insights, at least as much as the wisdom those lives produced.
Quote 28.5. Learn what is true in order to do what is right. Thomas Henry Huxley, 1825 to 1895. Quote definition. Right action is not independent of accurate knowledge, it depends on it. To do what is genuinely right in a given situation requires genuinely accurate understanding of what that situation actually is. Moral intention without factual grounding is well-meaning but often harmful. Genuine moral action requires the genuine knowledge that makes it possible to act on reality rather than on comfortable assumption. Quote application. This principle is the intellectual backbone of the entire wisdom education mission. The work of replacing hate requires first learning what is actually true about the people hatred targets, the history hatred rewrites, and the consequences hatred actually produces, because genuine kindness and genuine justice cannot be built on inaccurate foundations. Learn what is true, then do what is right. Thomas Henry Huxley was born in 1825 in Ealing, Middlesex, largely self-educated after age 10, became a physician through the apprenticeship route, made his scientific reputation through his work on marine invertebrates during a voyage to Australia, and became the most effective public advocate for Darwin's theory of natural selection, earning the nickname Darwin's Bulldog, for his ferocious defense of evolution against its critics. He also coined the word agnostic to describe his own epistemological position. His observation that learning what is true is the prerequisite for doing what is right reflects both his scientific conviction that genuine knowledge was grounded in evidence and honest inquiry, and his moral conviction that the lazy comfort of unchecked assumption was the enemy of both. He had spent his career demonstrating that what educated people confidently believed about biology was wrong in consequential ways, and he drew the obvious moral conclusion: check what you think is true before acting on it as though it were. This quote specifically encourages individuals to establish learning what is actually true as the first moral obligation preceding the choice of how to act rightly, not as academic exercise but as the foundation of genuine rather than merely well-intentioned action. 2. Apply honest factual inquiry to the situations and people you are making moral judgments about. What is actually true here before deciding what right action requires. 3. Recognize that the gap between good intentions and good outcomes is almost always a gap in accurate knowledge. Right action without true learning is the sincere cause of a great deal of genuine harm.
Quote 28.6. Never have a companion that casts you in the shade. Baltasar Gracian, 1601 to 1658. Quote definition. Choose companions and associations that elevate your visibility, your reputation, and your presence rather than diminishing them by contrast. The person who constantly overshadows you reduces your ability to contribute, develop, and be recognized for what you genuinely bring, not out of malice, but simply by the disproportion of the comparison. Associate with those alongside whom you can fully shine. Quote application. Gracian's principle applies to both personal and organizational choices. For individuals, seek communities, mentors, and collaborators who bring out your best rather than making you invisible by contrast. For the mission, position wisdom education where it can be clearly seen and fully received, not buried in contexts where it is perpetually overshadowed by louder, more immediately entertaining alternatives. Baltasar Gracian appears in teams 12, 16, 21, 22, and 26 across these 52 teams. His practical moral philosophy is extraordinarily range-covering. Born in 1601 in Belmonte de Calateid, Aragon, Gratian was a Jesuit priest whose art of worldly wisdom observed the courts and institutions of 17th-century Spain with the precision of someone who had watched what worked and what didn't across decades of careful attention. His principle about companions who cast you in shade reflects his consistent interest in the social conditions of effective action. The person who cannot be seen, heard, or recognized in a given context is functionally absent from it regardless of their actual quality. Context shapes perception, and the wise person manages context with the same care they bring to developing their own capabilities. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Choose your associations, collaborations, and contexts with honest attention to whether they allow your genuine contributions to be visible and valued, not from vanity but from the practical understanding that invisible contributions are lost contributions. 2. Recognize that being perpetually overshadowed is not humility but waste. Genuine humility is compatible with choosing contexts where what you bring can actually be seen and used. 3. Apply this to the mission's positioning. Place wisdom education in contexts where it can be clearly received and genuinely valuable, not perpetually overshadowed by the entertainment and noise that make it invisible.
Quote 28.7. A contented mind is the greatest blessing you can enjoy in this world. Joseph Addison 1672-1719. Quote definition. Among all the goods available in human life, wealth, health, fame, pleasure, achievement, the contented mind is the greatest because it is both the most universally accessible and the most completely fulfilling. Contentment is not passivity or resignation, but the genuine satisfaction of a mind at peace with what it is and what it has. A state that makes everything else better and whose absence makes everything else insufficient. Quote application. For the mission of making America wiser and kinder, Addison's principle names the destination that wisdom education ultimately serves. Not the accumulation of more knowledge but the development of the contented mind that genuine wisdom produces. The person who has internalized these principles does not merely know more. They are more at peace with themselves, with others, and with the world, which is the greatest available blessing and the genuine fruit of wisdom. Joseph Addison appears in teams 20 and 27 as well, where his principles about gestures proving profits and reading exercising the mind anchored those frameworks. Here his most personal observation closes the middle section of Team 28's quote sequence. Born in 1672 in Millston, Wiltshire, Addison co-founded The Spectator and spent his career arguing that the cultivation of reasonable, balanced, genuinely engaged minds was both the highest personal achievement and the foundation of a healthy civil society. His identification of the contented mind as the greatest available blessing was the conclusion of a life spent observing what actually produced enduring human satisfaction, versus what merely promised it. He had watched ambition, wealth, and fame produce their expected discontents as reliably as they produced their stated rewards, and he had concluded that the mind genuinely at peace with what it was, curious, engaged, grateful, not perpetually striving for what it lacked, was the only reliable source of the blessing most people spent their lives pursuing through other means. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Pursue the contentment of a genuinely developed mind as a primary life goal, rather than as the byproduct of achieving external goods that never quite deliver the peace they promise. 2. Distinguish between genuine contentment, the peace of a mind at home with itself and engaged with the world, and passive resignation that has given up rather than genuinely arrived. 3. Apply Addison's principle to wisdom education. The goal is not the accumulation of impressive knowledge, but the development of the contented, engaged, genuinely at peace mind that genuine wisdom produces.
Quote 28.8. Liberty is the right of doing whatever the laws permit. Charles II, Baron de Montesquieu 1689-1755. Quote definition. Genuine liberty is not the absence of all constraint, but the freedom to do whatever is within the bounds of legitimate law, the law that reflects genuine social agreement about the conditions of mutual flourishing. This is not a limitation on freedom, but its definition. Liberty is the space within which free action is possible without destroying the conditions that make freedom available to everyone. Quote application. Hatred frequently presents itself as a form of liberty, the freedom to say what you think, to act on contempt without restraint, to express prejudice as personal expression. Montesquieu's definition exposes the confusion. Genuine liberty is bounded by the equal liberty of others. The freedom to dehumanize others is not liberty, but the destruction of the conditions that make anyone's liberty possible, because liberty is the right of all, or it is the privilege of some at others' expense. Charles Louis de Secondat, Baron de la Brede et de Montesquieu, was born in 1689 near Bordeaux, France, educated at the Oratory of Juilly and the University of Bordeaux, and became one of the most influential political philosophers in Western history. Is The Spirit of the Laws, 1748, a massive comparative study of law, government, and the conditions of political freedom, directly influenced the design of the United States Constitution. The separation of powers is Montesquieu's contribution, transmitted through the founder's reading of his work, and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man. His Persian Letters, 1721, a satirical epistolary novel presenting French society through the eyes of imagined Persian visitors, was the most widely read French literary work of the early 18th century. His definition of liberty as the right of doing whatever the laws permit was not a restriction on freedom, but its most coherent formulation. He was distinguishing genuine liberty from license, and arguing that the rule of law, properly constituted, was not the enemy of freedom, but its indispensable condition. This quote specifically encourages individuals to 1. Understand genuine liberty as bounded by the equal liberty of others. The freedom that destroys others' freedom is not liberty, but its negation. 2. Apply this distinction to the uses of freedom of expression specifically. Genuine liberty of speech operates within the bounds that protect others' dignity and safety. Expression that destroys those conditions undermines the freedom it claims to exercise. 3. Recognize that the mission of making America wiser and kinder is a mission for genuine liberty, in Montesquieu's sense, expanding the space within which everyone can flourish, rather than the license of some at the expense of others' ability to do the same.
How They Work Together as a Unified Philosophy to Replace Hate with Motivational Education to GuideALife.com. The Begin Deliberately Framework. Initiation Layer. Begin now and organize genuinely. Quotes 1-2. Wordsworth. Deliver the most complete prescription for overcoming paralysis in 2 words. To begin, making the act of starting the sufficient and necessary first step. Helps. Immediately qualify that beginning with the distinction between genuine organization and comfortable routine, ensuring that what begins is purposeful engagement rather than the paralysis of habitual procedure. Together, the launch and the quality check of deliberate beginning. Wordsworth removes the excuse of waiting, just begin. Helps removes the substitute of busyness. Make sure what you begin is genuinely organized around actual purpose rather than the comfortable routine that feels like action while producing none. Begin deliberately, not just habitually. Development layer. Reading creates leaders and loving the giver. Quotes 3-4. Fuller. Establish that deliberate beginning through reading and learning is the investment that produces tomorrow's leadership capacity, making every serious reader a leader in development. Young. Ground that development in the right orientation. Love the giver more than the gift. Ensuring that the learning that produces leadership remains person-centered rather than becoming merely instrumental. Together, the direction and the soul of deliberate development. Fuller establishes that reading seriously today is building the leadership capability tomorrow requires. Young ensures that the development remains genuinely human, oriented toward the persons who give rather than merely the knowledge they provide. Learn to lead, love the teachers. Foundation layer. Truth as prerequisite and visibility as condition. Quotes 5-6. Huxley. Establish that right action requires true knowledge as its prerequisite. Learn what is true in order to do what is right, making honest inquiry the foundation of genuine rather than merely well-intentioned moral action. Gratian. Provide the social intelligence that makes the true knowledge effective. Never associate in contexts where your genuine contributions are overshadowed and therefore lost, ensuring that what has been learned can actually be seen and used. Together, the intellectual and social foundations of deliberate action. Huxley ensures that what begins is grounded in what is actually true, not comfortable assumption but honest inquiry. Gratian ensures that the truth-grounded contribution can be seen and received, in contexts where it is visible rather than perpetually overshadowed. Know truly, be seen clearly. Flourishing layer. Contented mind and law-bounded liberty. Quotes 7-8. Addison. Name the ultimate destination of deliberate beginning, the contented mind that is the greatest available blessing, ensuring that all the deliberate effort is directed toward genuine flourishing rather than perpetual striving. Montesquieu. Define the social condition within which genuine flourishing is possible. Liberty as the right of doing whatever the laws permit, establishing the bounded freedom that protects everyone's flourishing rather than the license that destroys others to advance one's own. Together, the destination and the social condition of deliberate living. Addison names the personal destination, the contented mind, the greatest blessing, toward which all the deliberate effort ultimately points. Montesquieu names the social condition that makes it universally available, genuine liberty bounded by law, protecting everyone's equal right to flourish. The contented mind within genuine liberty, the complete vision of what deliberate beginning builds toward.
Free easy extra advantage math, spelling and reading workbooks you can download for free at stop2think.com or buy at educationstopshate.com. Free easy math wisdom workbooks with octo repetition to grow math self-confidence. You'll get plenty of repetitive practice of age ranges and averages of our 52 teams of 8 quote authors. Free easy alpha cipher-coded puzzles teach letters, numbers, and phrases using antique wisdoms that encourage and educate. Can you decode this cipher quote of encouragement using either our learning to spell or just for fun instructions? And since time is money, practice reading faster with 52 teams of antique rival wisdoms that have passed the test of time to encourage, educate, and entertain generations for centuries. We offer printed versions and timed videos with background music. Sign up for free weekly emails of 52 teams of antique rival wisdom workbooks with easy math, spelling, and reading practice. And, if you'd like to get paid for sharing our wearable wisdoms, keep this in mind. Everyone I know wears a shirt, and most of us change them daily, so change your shirt and change the world. Social equalities are blatantly subliminal antique positive wisdoms repetitively shared without saying a word. This applies to all our wearable shareable wisdoms. Like pretty witty baby onesies and baby tees that you and others will see and read multiple times a day. The same is true with pretty witty kids, but they'll also share these wisdoms with anyone that can read at daycare or school. Youthful truths let your kids gain confidence sharing antique wisdoms with their friends. Imagine them sharing words of wisdom with classmates and teachers. I think, therefore I think tees I wear is a super easy way to share words of wisdom that have passed the test of time. Our social equalities help make us all wiser and kinder with blatantly subliminal messages promoting a more fair and equal opportunity society for all. And don't forget our giftwisdoms.com for birthdays and holidays that makes it easy to share the wisdom with clothing, coffee mugs, and magnets. So do the future a favor by encouraging, educating, and entertaining with words of wisdom that have passed the test of time to make us all wiser and kinder. With wearable wisdoms to fit babies, kids, and adults. You can clothe a whole family, city, or state. Join the 52 of 8 today.